Good morning, students, and happy Tuesday. So for today, we have to interpret another circle graph. So we're going to use the same method that we used yesterday, except this time we have different numbers and we don't have percentages. So after you do your review exercises and speed drills, we will go straight to our circle graph since we already know how to go about them. In this one, we have a circle graph that is an example of a schedule. This one's called Jane's School Day. So notice how you can use a circle graph to organize different kinds of information, whether it's a budget or a schedule, anything that you want to organize information into 100%, whether it's 100% of your budget or 100% of your day. So here we have many different tasks or things to do and then sleep. So we have Jane's school day. She sleeps for 9 hours. She has chores for 1 hour a day. She has school for 6 hours a day. She has meals for 2 hours, play for 4 hours, and homework for 2 hours. So this takes up her entire day. And we're going to do the same thing we did yesterday. And the first two samples are pretty easy to do. The first one says, how many hours per day does Jane play? Well, we can just easily look and see that she plays for 4 hours and write 4 hours. So this one's pretty easy. The second sample says, how much time does Jane spend each day at work and doing homework? So remember, like yesterday, you may have to add, subtract, multiply, divide to find your answer. So it's important to read your question slowly and make sure that you're understanding the question completely. So we're going to add the time that she spends at school and the time that she spends doing homework. So we see that she spends 6 hours at school and 2 hours doing homework, and 6 plus 2 is 8. So in total, that would be 8 hours. So you will continue on just like you did yesterday, making sure that you are reading the questions completely. So here for Tuesday's language arts assignment, the written portion is actually on page 159. However, before we do 159, we have to understand quotations and capitals here on page 158 when we start our new unit, Unit 9. So let's go over writing direct quotations so that we can learn how to apply these skills and concepts to our exercises. So it says here, writing direct quotations. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote the famous lines, quote, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. When the enemy demanded that John Paul Jones surrender, he replied, I have not yet begun to fight." So notice how when you are going to say what someone else has said, you are directly quoting the words that someone said. You use these quotation marks. And I'm sure that this isn't the first time you've seen this. So these sentences are called quotations because they quote another person or what another person said or wrote. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to place quotations and also how to write quotations. Here for look closely, and I always like these because you get some extra tips. So don't skip over the look closely sections because I feel like they're really helpful when doing the writing exercises. So it says, a direct quotation begins with a capital letter, even when it is not the first word in the sentence. So notice that. If you are quoting someone, you're going to capitalize that quote after your quotation mark. A direct quotation is separated from the rest of the sentence by commas. So when you're about to quote someone, you're going to add a comma first. Then it has a little example. And I like this because you can then go back and look at this example to make sure that you are writing your quote right. So here's an example. It says, Laurel said, comma, quote, my work is done, quote, with a capital letter. So notice the comma is used, the capital letter is used in between these quotation marks. So if you are quoting someone in the exercise of today or tomorrow, you can always go back to this example and see, did I add my comma? Did I make sure that my quote is capitalized? And here, some more tips. Do not use a comma if the quotation is a question or an exclamation. Okay, so here's an exception. Are you ready? Dad asked. So notice there is no comma here after your quote. If it is a question or exclamation. What a great car, Ty exclaimed. So you can always put a little hint here, like make sure you know that if it's a question or quotation, no commas. Commas and most end marks should be placed inside the last quotation marks. Here's more examples. Have you met our new classmate? Questioned Mrs. Stevenson. So here notice that the question is inside of the little quotation mark here. Yes, we have, comma, replied the students. Again, the comma is inside of the quotation marks. It says on Write A, on notebook paper, copy the sentence which contains the direct quotation by John Paul Jones. Pay attention to the punctuation and copy it exactly. Write your own quotation. Try quoting a family member or friend. Be sure to use correct punctuation. So you have two things that you have to do on Write A, but they're fairly quick. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to quote this top person here we learned about, John Paul Jones, when he said, I have not yet begun to fight. It just wants you to copy it. So copy quote on the top. And then for a more creative exercise, create your own quote. Or quote someone else. Remember that when you're quoting someone else, you are saying exactly what they said from their mouth, from their words. Here on Think B, you're going to study the following direct quotation and then be ready to answer the questions for your teacher. So, when we do our small group for language arts, as we usually do, I'll make sure that you understand these. So that's why I wrote page 159 for your assignment, because you don't have to write anything for numbers 1 through 4 here. We will be going over it during our small group. So our actual written work for Tuesday is here, where you're going to do Think C and Think D. Even though it looks long, it's actually not, because you're only going to be placing quotation marks around the part that is the actual direct quotation. And when you read them out loud, which I recommend you read them out loud even if it's low to yourself, you will usually identify when the quote starts. Like number 1 says, Jesus saith unto him, or saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So where's the quote? Well, if you are saying, he said to him, comma, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I can hear the quote quite easily. So you're just adding the little quotation marks. Number 2, and God said, comma, let there be light. You can clearly hear where the quote starts. So that's what you'll do from numbers 3 through 10. And then the only difference is that for think D, you're going to add quotes and commas and end marks. So end marks, of course, would be your period, your exclamation point, your question mark. So make sure that you're not just doing the quotes, but also the comma and the end marks. So, what doest thou here? Asked a man named Goodwill. What doest thou here? So we have our quote here. Make sure that your comma goes before the quotation mark. And since this is a question, make sure that your question mark goes here. Okay. So actually not a comma, a question mark. Because the question doesn't end at the end of the sentence. The question is in between the quotation marks. So no comma in this one, just the question mark. Let's try number 2, since I kind of confused us a tiny little bit saying there was a comma first. Christian replied, so I already know that's a comma because it's not asking anything. Christian replied, comma, I come from the city of destruction, comma, but I am going to Mount Zion to be delivered from the wrath to come. So that is completely a quote. It's quite long, but it is all a quote. I come from the city of destruction, but I am going to Mount Zion to be delivered from the wrath to come. So he's just making a statement. He's not asking a question. So we're going to put a period there. And I'm going to do one more just to be sure because of the little blip on number 1. Number 3, will you let me enter through the gate? Sir asked Christian. Notice how sir is capitalized, so it's a proper noun. And this is a question. So quotation marks first. And even though they put a comma here, like I was tricked on number 1, it is actually a question mark. So of course we would go here and check it out. Notice here, have you met our new classmate? Question mark. So definitely there should not have been a comma there, even if you see one. Question mark and quotes. So you're going to complete this from numbers 4 through 10. So here for Tuesday's assignment, I am starting on our page 125 pattern word exercise. So you're just going to organize the words by their Latin root. So their root, separating from the prefixes and the suffixes. It's going to be pretty easy. So for numbers 1 through 3, the words that have the root rupt, R-U-P-T. Then for 4 through 8, the root struct. And for 9 through 12, the root form. So obviously, all of these words are going to have these inside, and you're just sorting them. Our content word section is the same as usual, using your letter hint to complete your sentences.